Mr. Liverman,
Here.
Ms. Crummiller,
Here.
Mr. Quinn,
Here.
Ms. Fraga,
Here.
Mayor Lemper.
Here. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we will start with announcements, and I'll start on my right with Mr. Cohen. Any announcements
I
tonight?
don't have any announcements.
I don't have any
Mr. Liverman, Ms. Kremiller, Mr. Quinn, Ms. Fraga.
I think everybody already knows about the Mary Moss Playground. It's open for business. And I think as we saw everybody and all the little kids enjoying it. So that's
Great. Excellent. All right, and I don't have any announcements tonight either. Any announcements from staff? Okay. I think we're in the August slowdown here. We'll move on to approval of the minutes, and we have,
Well, I'd like to approve all the minutes. I mean, to
move them in a block.
Move them all in block from May 17th, May 21st, May 20, and June 11th,
And June 25th.
and June 25th.
Right.
So moved.
And so, will you want to second it? Okay,
Second.
So, and so it's been moved by Ms. Kremiller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Are there any corrections to any of the minutes? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes all pass. And I want to thank the clerk's office for getting these in, and it's great. So,
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
all right, there's a proclamation on the agenda, but we're going to be holding that so that the recipients can be here when we do it. So that will be coming in September, I believe. And now we move to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. And I apologize, I didn't pick up the sheet that was on the dais. I don't know if there was a sign-up sheet there, but given that there's only two of you, I'd like to open up the mic. If either of you would like to speak, I welcome you. No? Okay. Then we'll move on to reports, and we'll start with Chief Sutter with the May and June 2018 police reports.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I take questions on the report, I just had two quick things to mention. Our Youth Academy will begin next Monday, a week from today. We had a great turnout and in both for counselors and participants, so we're very excited about that. And I had mentioned, I was talking with Ms. Stockton before we started, we did have a parking officer resign for a new opportunity. So in speaking with Ms. Stockton and with Mr. DeShield, we're going to deliberately move here and kind of look at staffing needs moving forward, but that will have effect moving forward with some enforcement. We're going to juggle some schedules with the two remaining officers so that we get as much coverage as we can into the evening, but I think you'll see that loss in the reports going forward until we come up with a new plan. And with that, I'd love to answer any questions.
Ms. Carmela?
I just had a follow-up question because I was reading the minutes and I was reminded of your idea and wondering if it had, what the status of the gun locks for guns?
Yes, we obtained, right after that meeting, I spoke with the Detective Bureau, and we've obtained hundreds of locks that we actually already had, and we ordered some more, and they're being given out with firearms permits, and also the detective speaks to the recipients about proper storage, the law, and responsible gun ownership. So that's a whole piece that is now gone over with specifically handgun permits.
If you already own a gun, can you just come and get a lock
Yes,
permit? Okay.
absolutely.
So people know
you
they
can
can
come
just-
right in, and
Okay.
we have them readily at hand, and we can hand them out.
Maybe we can put that on our website?
Yes, we'll do that. Absolutely, do that again. Yep.
That's great. Are there any other questions? Ms. Fraga?
Yes, I just was wondering if there's any follow-up Any guidelines on the parking violations, warrants on parking violations?
Yes. As of right now, I don't know if we spoke about this the last time I was here. Right now, there are no, the state put a hold on all warrants being issued for parking summonses within the state. I believe that extended to minor motor vehicle violations as well, but I'm not 100% sure about that piece. And I construe that as the first step in the reform process, and that they're going to be moving to another process for unpaid parking tickets. Don't know what that is yet.
Okay.
They haven't come out with that that piece of legislation, or actually be a court rule. I think that's going to be coming soon. I can't imagine that there's not a plan that, being that action was taken.
And you'll update that as that
Absolutely,
happens.
absolutely. It's a very important thing to get out publicly too, once that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
Thank you. Two things, Chief. I noticed that the Safe Neighborhood Bureau took part in Autism Shield training. Could you explain
Yes.
a little about what's involved there?
Absolutely. That's a program that we put all our officers through, and it goes by different names. The programs are similar, and it's about education for officers encountering, mostly dealing with children with autism. Can be adults as well. The main issue is that we've learned that the actions that a person with this condition may have can be misconstrued if one is not educated. It could be misconstrued a variety of different ways. So we are trained in how to first be open-minded to this possibility and empathetic to that this is a possible issue. We also, once we identify that a person may have this condition, we are trained in how to effectively deal and communicate. Communication can be very difficult, and it can be, again, misconstrued as, for lack of a better word, non-compliance or being uncooperative when it isn't. So it's super important training. We've been doing it for a good while, and we also have a registration program, I don't know if you know about, where people can register their loved ones with us, and we put a notification in our computer-aided dispatch system. So when we respond to a house, it'll tell us before we get there, there may be a person with this condition that you need to be aware of, so when you get there, you're prepared to deal with it.
Oh, that's excellent. And is there communication with the schools, with like the special services office at the
Yes,
schools?
absolutely. We're in contact with them regularly, sharing information about these types of issues.
The other question I had was about the state attorney general's ruling not to prosecute marijuana possession, and you're not asking for your personal feelings on it, but how has that order, which went to local prosecutors, and obviously we have an interim prosecutor, how is that affecting policing on the street?
So we did meet with I met, I should say, at a monthly meeting with the county prosecutor and discussed this as well. The real important piece is that this just deals with prosecution right now. So it didn't change the process or the guidelines or the law with regard to investigations. Again, my interpretation is this is the first step in some type of reform that's going to take place. So I kind of wish that these things happened more in a more concise manner, where we got more information up front so that we could adapt our protocols. We just haven't gotten that yet. So there's all marijuana prosecutions are basically delayed until the date set forth in the guideline. I'm hoping at that point there's instruction from the Attorney General to law enforcement that is more pertinent to the investigative side, because nothing has changed there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, just following up on that, I mean, reading between the lines, wouldn't that mean that you aren't as vigorous going after marijuana possession, or not?
Um, I, I don't think that it's something that marijuana possession in and of itself isn't something that we necessarily target in any way anyway. It's something that we encounter through the course of another investigation, usually like a car stop. I, I think that this reform is going to start with, on the prosecutorial side, with the gradings and things like that. So I think why they're doing this is that people that are charged may be treated, it may be treated differently in the criminal justice system after the September date. So it's very hard for us to kind of react from a law enforcement standpoint until
Because illegal is illegal.
Yeah, and believe me, we've talked a lot about the personnel time that it takes to process these things. So from a professional standpoint and from a personnel strength standpoint and the use of personnel, it would be it's a very it's a costly process, these types of arrests. So we're interested to see how that might change.
Can you give us an update? I know that you're recruiting right now on
Yes.
just how the recruitment process is going, and remind us of the timeline for
Yes.
that.
Absolutely. So we're real excited about this. We officially opened up, I think, about 2.5 weeks ago. As of today, we have just over 500 applicants.
Wow.
So we expect, if these numbers keep up, they'll probably, as the cutoff date approaches in early September. I think the date of the test is September 5th. I bet you these numbers will at least double. That's our expectation, if not maybe a little more. So we're probably going to have over 1,000 applicants at the start of the process. So the written exam, I believe, is September 5th. We will then have, from that, the qualified applicants that pass will move on to the physical fitness test in early October. Soon after, we'll begin the intensive process of interviews. And what our deadline is to have a list that we can present qualified applicants to mayor and council by the end of November, which is we actually have met. We have a timeline really set. It's a matter of us being able to state that. The test dates are concrete. It's going to be our ability to move through the interview process of several hundred candidates, and then the background process is where it really starts to slow down. So we've developed some protocols to keep it moving and to really require compliance and from the candidate to keep on time with these deadlines to get some qualified candidates to you.
Right, well, that's great, and I feel like the number of applicants and interest you're getting is just a sign of the
Yeah,
fact that
I'm hopeful.
I mean, I think your leadership and it's
Thank you.
it's a great police
Thanks.
department, great place to work, and a great community too. And I think
Thank
the
you.
relationship there is really strong, and hopefully that's one of the things that's a good selling point
Absolutely.
for great candidates. So that's good. Are there any other questions or comments for the chief? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and next we'll go over where we are with our 2018 goals and priorities with Mr. DeShield.
hopefully get the visuals up. What I'm going to do this evening is review the goals and council goals and priorities and give you an update of the status of those based on those in the first and second quarter. I'll walk through, just going to highlight those items which I'm going to highlight those items that I think are important. If you have any questions, just interrupt me and I can talk those issues. I just don't want to go through each and every one of those. I'm not sure if we need to do that. Perfect. First item on the list is the neighborhood character study. The neighborhood character study, with the consultant completing the proposed changes to the ordinances. As we were putting the ordinances together, we realized there would be some complications, so you'll see the schedule for the neighborhood characters have been expanded a little bit. Just to review for you, we currently are working on the markup of an ordinance that will be being marked up between now and September. The final draft of that ordinance will be prepared at the end of September with the introduction of that ordinance in October. The first meeting in October, it will then go to the planning board for final adoption October 22nd.
Mark, do you want comments and questions as you go through this, or do you want to
Sure.
go through the whole thing? And
It's easier probably as I
Okay.
have one just.
because the last time I heard with this, there were some issues, and hopefully we're still on the schedule because it's form-based code and figuring out how the form-based interacted with the more
Correct.
traditional ordinances, but we're still on track for this schedule.
That's correct. And the
Okay.
issue was being, one, we're taking a different type of code structure and trying to integrate it into our old code. In addition, we have the old borough code and the old township code, which we have to integrate, which makes it a bigger task than we initially thought. And that's why we expanded the period for putting the ordinance together. But
Okay.
it's still on track. We've actually received back the comments from the attorney. So we're working on that now. We'll be then working with the planning consultant to have the final ordinance prepared at the end of
Okay.
September.
Okay, great.
One thing, and also wanted the colors on the side just give you an idea of where we are with those. Green, we're progressing, moving forward. The yellows, delayed or modified, and red is unfavorable. The next item we have is the implementation of the affordable housing plan. As you can see, that has been modified. Quite frankly, that's based on the court-ordered mediation. We're currently working with the Affordable Housing Committee and Fair Share Housing to develop a proposal. If we accept a settlement with Fair Share, we'll then present that to the judge. She'll provide us a new schedule. If we come to an impasse, we'll present that to the judge, and she will provide us with a new schedule moving forward. So at this point, the dates and times for moving forward with affordable housing are on hold as we speak. But we are diligently moving forward, trying to move that forward. The next issue is the land use harmonization. Phase one of that was completed earlier this year with the administrative portions of the land use ordinance harmonized. Phase two, which is the zoning section of the ordinance with our current staffing levels in the planning department. In addition, we have some additional planning activities, including the redevelopment for this year. I'm recommending that we hold off on this until 2019. We'll continue to work on it, but I don't foresee the zoning portion of that being able to be worked on this year, but we will be mapping out a plan for next year to do that full consolidation. Went ahead too many. Just want to make one comment here because there is actually a change on the first, which is evaluating and changes to the permitted use in the business district. That was brought before the Economic Development Committee. It was reviewed, discussed. There was not a consensus on making any changes to the uses. However, out of that conversation, there were an opportunity to do the outdoor dining ordinance changes, and you'll see that coming before council in September.
A question. Why was that on the list then if there was no, was there a request for uses or was that an issue
Out
for
of
use
the
change?
out of the economic development plan that we prepared last year, there was a request to look at that issue. We did, but there was no consensus of there should be any changes in any uses.
But was there any, was there also no big interest?
Correct.
No, well, so I'll describe it this way. There was interest from some parties, and mainly the discussion focused around the CBD and whether there should be maybe outlying parts of the central business district where you could put an office on the first floor. And maybe you'd have an area where there would be, you'd almost like encourage financial offices or other types of things. And it was a way to more intentionally almost shrink the retail and restaurant areas into a smaller space. But Mark is right that there was a lot of discussion about it, and there were strong feelings on both sides, but there was no consensus.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad idea to me.
But I think
Put on
that,
the record.
but I feel like the council priority was to explore it, which I think we did, and I feel like I think that should be an okay thing to put on our priority list, is to explore an issue. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to decide to move forward with it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. That sounds good.
The next items we have is the recommendations for from the Economic Development Report. And there are a couple of issues here that I wanted to discuss. First being development of the Economic Development Plan. I'm really looking for some direction from council. I know it did go to a subcommittee. The subcommittee, I don't believe there was consensus on the plan. We just need direction in terms of, are we going to put together a formal plan, bringing in a consultant to do that or not? And that's just some direction we need to move that forward. The next item is posting the downtown maps. We've completed the Spring Street map. However, there was some discussions about using the kiosks. So I wanted some direction from council also on the kiosks, whether that's something that we wanted to do in terms of placing maps on the kiosks, because I know there have been several issues concerning those. So I wanted to make sure we bring those before council.
Well,
before
right,
moving
because
forward.
actually the university has offered to do that for us.
Excuse me.
And so we did, and so we have it on the agenda for, at Public Works. I mean,
Agreed.
just FYI, maybe I should, and David has, has looked into a different material and sprucing up the kiosks. So hopefully we can work on that. And part of, it will be putting new maps on the kiosks and sprucing up the tacking areas, because one of the reasons the
Thank
kiosks
God.
are so terrible is because you can only use a staple gun to put things up, and so it's really hard to take things out. So there's a different material that David has found that we might be able to use, and you can use thumbtacks with it, correct?
Okay, perfect. And the final item is the recommendation for streamlining the permit approval process, recommending that be deferred as we have started the process of recruitment of the municipal planner, and that's going to be an integral part of that process, so we want to have that person involved in the development of that process. The other areas, just in terms of an update, signed ordinance changes will be brought before council in September, and I believe those are the main things for that. Any questions on this page?
Well, two things. So for the sign ordinance, are you going to have like some people from council to, work before it comes to the whole council, or you're just going to bring it to the whole council? Or?
So Josh Zinder he's the one who's sort of spearheading this. He gave a presentation to council a while ago. This has just been moving slowly. I believe did he come and present to HPC?
Yes, he did.
And then is incorporating those comments, and then it's going to go to the Economic Development Committee, which meets next Friday. And then I'm trying to remember where it goes from there. I think that it might go to ZARC to look at,
I believe so, yes.
and then it'll come to council too. But it's
Okay,
going to get worked
okay.
over by a lot of
Okay.
groups.
I mean, and then to backtrack a little bit, I was wondering the same thing about the neighborhood character, just to make sure that it goes the way we want it to. Should the committee meet, I mean, is the committee going to meet before the council meets, just so we can hopefully head off any problems if there
So
are
if we
any?
want to, we can set a meeting up during that September timeframe while we're putting it together, so you
Yeah,
can
that
review
seems
what
like
the
a good
changes
idea.
are. Let me just go back. The next item we have is the development and design for historic preservation, design standards for historic preservation commission. This is one project, the only project that is in a point that is unfavorable. My suggestion to move this project forward, we really need to define what the scope of that project would be. So I would suggest that maybe there's either a subcommittee of council that can give some definitions to help move the project along. Next item is the review of the different permits, the permit regulations, and make recommendations based on the current parking changes that we're making to the system recommended by the consultant, that we deal with the real structural issues of the system first, and then go in and deal with the issues like the residential parking, shared parking, and 24-hour parking. So that has been moved to 2019. Let me just go back real quick. And I know the shared services, this project we have to December, there may be a need for, I mean, there may be an interest in moving this a little quicker. So we will be working with the different committees to see if that may move a little quicker than is indicated on the schedule.
Where are you looking, where are we?
I'm on page 6. I know I jumped back. Page 6,
Okay.
where the
Yeah.
final project
Okay.
was December, and that may be moving forward based on recent conversations I had.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mark and I discussed how as in my role as liaison to the school district, they're very interested in pursuing a consultant study sooner than the November, December timeframe. So they expressed an interest in moving a resolution to split the cost of a consultant in September. So I think it'd be great if that could go forward.
Okay, great.
Have any comments for page 7, 8? We're going to go to page 9. And that's the Mary Moss Playground with the completion of the, not Mary Moss, I'm stuck on Mary Moss. With the completion of the Mary Moss Playground, we have an opportunity to make an application for the Merceret Play Grant again. So we'll go through the process. That will be a review of the alternative process for the park and a discussion in September. Options will be prepared for the grant application, presented to council in December, with the application due in July of 2019.
So the first part of that, the alternatives, that's the rec commission, I'm assuming and they'll bring forward
Correct.
sort of option A, option B, or a single recommendation?
They're going to bring a number of alternatives
Okay.
for council to discuss. All right, page 9, we're going to skip. Page 10, and let's go to the final page, which indicates a number of things. First, I want to highlight There was a major project added to the goals list with the redevelopment study for the seminary, which could potentially create the need for a redevelopment plan, which will take considerable resources. The next items are projects that are scheduled for later this year. Those include expanding the broadband services, the employee incentive programs, moving to a new code book vendor, and then phase 2 of the neighborhood character study. But I also wanted to highlight some of the major items that are not part of the council's plan but are important projects being worked on through staff. One of those we'll be discussing this evening, the Harrison Street garage repairs from the previous goals. Those bids were received. You're going to be approving that this evening. The cold storage project, they're finalizing the revisions for the bid documents for those to go out this month or September. John Street improvements, designs are in process as we speak. And then on the flow study for the PSOC, spring and early summer flow monitoring was completed, and they're waiting for the data to make some decisions. We also have a major project that we're going to have to deal with this year, which is strategies for improvements for the volunteer fire service. We have a consultant working on a report. I expect that to come in this fall that we'll have to deal with. We have 2 project engineering is working in conjunction with PFARs, both the signal improvements, the road improvements, and also the fueling station. And then the other one I want to highlight, you can read the rest. A major one that we haven't kind of talked about is the GIS implementation. Last year you approved the consultant. They will be preparing the recommendations on the investigation report. We should be getting that again this fall, so we can be in the process of implementing a strategic GIS program. Any questions?
This looks great, Mark. I just noticed that the neighborhood character phase 2 is in your presentation, but it's not. So I just want to make sure that the right one gets in the official documents, because I actually like this document. I reference it all the time, so I don't want to lose anything for my record. So if we can just make sure that gets in the minutes or online or whatever, wherever
Okay.
this document's
I'll make
saved,
sure
that'd be great.
Kathy has it.
Are there any questions or comments at this point? Seems like we're going to have a busy 4 months. Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Cohen?
I just wanted to comment on the notion of getting a committee together to address design guidelines for the Historic Preservation Committee. I guess it's sensible to get a committee together to make some decisions, sort of guidance decisions, what we're looking for. But as I've mentioned in the past to individuals on the council, I think that a consultant is probably needed to develop the guidelines, that it's something HPC will not be able to take care of on their own. So I just want to make people aware of that really should be the goal, is maybe to get a committee together to develop some guidelines or standards or goals, for that consultant, but that the hiring of a consultant is important.
I agree with that.
I agree. You said it actually much more elegantly than I did.
I would say that comment earns you a place on the committee.
I knew I had no chance of avoiding it anyway. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, and before we get to the work session, I just wanted to check and see if there are any council reports, and start with Mr. Cohen.
I have a couple of reports coming out of my work as liaison to the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee. I've had a couple of meetings with Christine Symington and other individuals in recent weeks, and I wanted to make council aware. One is with a company called Green Spot, which focuses on providing electric vehicle car share services to municipalities. And it's a pretty painless thing if we decided to go with them. Basically, they'll help us identify a few parking spaces around town that we would have to give up, but then they would take care of everything else. They would install the charging infrastructure, provide the vehicles and maintenance on the vehicles, manage the share program, And it seems like a really good opportunity to both help reduce vehicle ownership through the idea of a car share, but have fewer emissions and more efficient energy use and by having EVs. So I want to bring that information to council at some time and see if we can move forward on working with them. In addition, they talked some about the possibility of providing EVs for municipal use. And they've done this, I guess they were saying in New York, they actually saved millions of dollars by having EV car shares for appropriate staff who were able to do car sharing versus having each their own vehicle. And so we're going to provide that information to Mark. And of course, that was a goal for council this year to try and move forward with using EVs for the municipal fleet where possible. So I think this is an interesting way to be able to do that. The one other thing I wanted to mention is a few weeks ago, we had a meeting of a committee to work on the renewal application for Princeton's age-friendly community status, which is due in about a year, I guess. And one of the outgrowths of that was to try and move forward more aggressively with the neighborhood outreach program that I've talked about and a few of you are aware of, where basically we'd approach neighborhood associations in town and see if we could partner with them to have sort of a buddy system where people in a neighborhood would sort of help look after vulnerable people in that neighborhood, whether older folks or people who have compromised capabilities. And so we're planning a program in late October at the library where we'll be inviting representatives from those neighborhood groups, and we'll have speakers who have a special interest in the program, like Bob Gregory, is the head of local emergency planning, and Susan Hoskins is an expert on aging, and so just be aware that we're working on that, and I'll have more information about that as it moves forward.
Yeah, just a report. As you know, this August is when we have our Corner House leadership retreat at the Princeton University, and I just wanted to thank the Griffin Cole Fund. They've been supporting us for the last 5 or 6 years. Griffin Cole Fund. James Cole was a student there for years, and after he left, his family felt they wanted to give back to Corner House, so every year they pick up the entire tab. Yeah, very nice. And we had an outstanding group of committed high school juniors and seniors, and they're ready to serve the community. There were 14 former student leaders, all college students, assisted as chaperones. It was the largest student board of 22 high school seniors in Corner House history. They're very, very excited about serving on municipal boards and providing a student perspective, such as serving on the Corner House Board, Health Commission, Human Services, and Rec. I was the person that welcomed the students there that morning, so I did that at 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody gathered. I gave a welcoming speech, and I will tell you, there are a bunch of well-respected and, it seemed to me, dedicated young folks that I've seen in a while. So I think we're really lucky to have some great people this year. Thank you.
Ms. Krummeller? Mr. Quinn?
Just one quick report. The Environmental Commission reviewed its draft Phase 2 for the stormwater regs, and they're going forward. They agreed on a draft with Jack West, and they're going to start their education phase, which means that we can all be expecting an appointment with members of the Environmental Commission and the Watershed Institute, talking about these new regs, which are specifically about redevelopment. And then just, I should have made this in the announcement, that the Bike Advisory Committee has agreed on a date for the mayor's bike ride, which is going to be Sunday, September 23rd, and we expect full council participation in this year's mayor's bike ride. We've moved it up to what hopefully will be better weather than previous years.
Do you have a time for that?
I don't, actually.
Okay. I only ask because there's actually two events. There's SHUP, is that same day, the Send Hunger Packing event, and the Send Hunger Packing. And then also this year, it just coincided that we've been talking with the University Art Museum and holding a community event. They want to start working on bringing people from this community, from Witherspoon Jackson community, over to across the street. So we're holding our next Loteria event right there at the Art Museum. And they're going to do a special tour in English and Spanish. So gonna try to, but it's also on the 23rd.
So I think the SHUP event starts at 1, correct?
Yes,
So,
And the
Mayor, we're riding early that morning, probably around 10 o'clock.
Or we
And-
can ride with a full
yeah.
stomach and we can go on a tour of
Yes.
town. It sounds like we need to stop at the library and at the art museum.
And yes, the Loteria event, we already know, will be from 11 to 2. It's a 3-hour event.
We're open to any bike ride.
Right. Well, maybe the bike ride should start at 2 p.m. at the art museum, and we can expand the route.
That
Something.
sounds
I don't know. We'll figure it out. But that's good information. That's why we have these reports so that we can work out any kinks. Yes.
Yes.
Do you have any more reports? Okay. I have a bunch, so I'll try to go quickly. Did anybody from the Public Works Committee want to talk about recycling, or no?
There really isn't much to report.
Well, so there's been an additional request. So, I mean, I just want
Oh,
the rest
right,
of
but
council to know that
okay.
that we're probably going to be faced pretty soon with a request for increasing the amount we pay for recycling even before the end of the year because of the
I mean, you should know that the Public Works Committee didn't feel like there was, I mean, we didn't hear a real good rationale to do that, and
There
we're
wasn't
not inclined to do
overwhelming
that.
support or any support.
Right.
right.
I think there's a need for more information.
Right, okay. I also want to recognize Thomas Brinkman, who's here tonight, and just thank him. So Thomas has been interning with the Shade Tree Commission and helping with the Emerald Ash Borer issue. And he's one of the, what do you call it, developers of the hashtag app.
Stand up with the microphone.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate your help.
That's great.
And as you know, we received a grant from the Bloomberg Foundation that we're using towards developing a new and improved composting program here in town. And it is due on a week from today. So we're in the final stages. But one thing that people might hear as part of this, we wanted to do an experiment on what would happen if we made the program available to everybody. So John Street was selected in part because we have Princeton University students helping us, so it was walkable to their building, and also it was a neighborhood where neighbors could see one another. So most of the households on John Street received a curbside bucket and the kitchen collector, and some of them received some information and others received other information to just see how things were going. One of the initial feedbacks we got from the trial was really great. So we got an angry call from one of the residents who didn't get a bin saying, "Where's my bin?" So I think it was, we were trying to see if there was something about you know, not neighborhood pressure, but if it became sort of a social norm, what impact that would have. So anyway, we're continuing with that, and I'll keep you posted. We're supposed to hear back in October, so keep your fingers crossed. And the last thing is, I was invited to take part in this program called the Mayor's Institute on City Design, and it's a partnership between the NEA, National Endowment of the Arts, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So they have these conferences where they bring together a small group of mayors and then a small group of design experts. So there's going to be 8 of us, 8 mayors at this meeting that's going to be in Austin in December, and each town is supposed to bring a topic to talk about, and then you sort of learn from one another. So I'm still in the process of trying to figure out what's the best topic to bring to this. They're actually sending someone out that will meet with me and meet with staff, and if there's other people who are interested, and if people have ideas for a good project to bring, definitely open to that. And it's exciting. Last time Princeton went was, I think, in the 1980s. So it's all paid for, which is great. So it's a chance to get some free input, and then also hear what other towns are struggling with, and those might be projects that we're struggling with in the future too. So I'll try to take a lot of notes. Are there any other reports from staff? Yep, Stockton.
I just have one update. Walnut Lane has been under construction this summer. Most of the pedestrian improvements are repaired and in place now, and we'll be beginning the milling and resurfacing phase of the project. So the goal is to have it ready and open again for school. We were able to successfully work with the municipal arborist and one of our property owners on the street to extend a piece of missing sidewalk. We initially did not have it in the plan, but through the course of construction, there was one missing piece that extended from the school district's parking lot on Geo from that point to Walnut. And so we were able to work with the property owner. He had an entire row of vegetation that Public Works assisted in the removal of, and he did have a sprinkler system in that area as well that we've been able to preserve and still fit in a sidewalk. So that was a good win for us to complete the sidewalk system in that area. That's
Great. Thank you. Okay. And now you're up for the work session on parking.
All right, so as the presentation's loading, this very short presentation, there's going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made in the next few months with parking, and so I will be intending to, at every meeting, kind of review what decisions have made, and then give you an idea of the upcoming topics that will have to be discussed and decided upon. So just right off the bat here, you'll see at the bottom left corner is our new logo for Princeton Parking. So Park Princeton is the new logo, and that's the draft final representation of what it will look like for us. Passport is working on the app. We've given them authorizations for the Apple and Google terms and conditions, so they're getting the Android and the iOS app work together for us. IPS has indicated that the parking meters will be installed during the month of October with a November 5th launch. So with that information, Dixon has worked with us to put together this phase-out schedule for the smart cards. The idea is after we discuss this at council tonight and get direction from you, we will then put this information out at all of the smart card distribution points, refill points, and go out with a press release. So the current idea is at the end of August, beginning of September, we're going to end smart card sales. So no new smart cards will be sold. And it's fortuitous because that's about the time that we will run out of smart cards in our inventory. So, and we're also talking about limiting the refill amounts as well at that time, just so that people are not adding to balances that they currently have, not adding large amounts. And so we haven't come up with what that threshold amount might be, but that's right now one of the discussion points we had at Public Works Committee, that would be a good thing to tie in at that point. And then in October, at the beginning of October, we'd actually end smart card refills. And that would tie into the new meters being installed and the app getting to the final stages with all of the marketing and information that goes along with that. And then the final piece is that the smart cards will still be able to be used at the parking garage, but then that piece again would phase out at the end of the year. So by 2019, the smart cards will be out of our system. And so right now what we're really pushing for anybody that holds a smart card with a balance is to use your balance. We're looking at all of the options on transferring balances, but we need to look at it more from a fiscal standpoint as well as that public perception as to what's going to work best for the municipality. So right now the message is going to be use your balance, and more information as it's put together will be put out to the public.
Can we just interject with questions? Yeah, Ms. Cromwell?
Yeah, we discussed this at Public Works, and I would like to discuss that at the very least, the message is the smart card will end on January 1st and there will be no balance transfers, because I think the downside, from what I understand, is it's a kind of an unknown of what our financial liability would be, since we don't have a record of the outstanding balances, and so I would be more aggressive than this. I wonder why don't we just stop selling them now? Just, and put notices that they don't say it is suggested, say you must use your balance. I know that right now, I understand that it's going to be painful for people who have smart cards, but it's going to be painful either sooner or later, and we might as well get it over with rather than take on an unknown of promising balances.
But isn't part of the problem that the meters now, they don't accept credit cards? They would have to have cash, and they would have to have coins, and a lot of people nowadays, unfortunately, don't carry coins. So that's the only reason why I would say for a 4-month period, I think there'll be a lot of people in trouble if they don't have any way of paying that meter.
Can I ask a question from a different perspective? So I'm assuming we're going to be ending the smart cards at the garage when the garage gets new equipment?
No, the idea is just to pick a date to end the use of the smart card. The garage equipment in general is not changing. It is still top of the line system, even though we installed it about 3 years ago. We are working with TIBA, the manufacturer of that system, to see if there's any upgrades or changes that we should consider. But right now, really, it's just going to be pulling out the smart card equipment that had to be kind of field fit into the TIBA system.
And
So-
the advantage of pulling it out is that it will make the other system work better? Or is there any downside to keeping it at the garage operational for longer? Or is the worry just that it's finicky and at some point it's going to break and we don't want to have to service it and it's better to be intentional about when it's coming out? Is that?
That's pretty much the case. I mean, we've seen that with the smart card as it became obsolete, and we've had trouble keeping it working. And so the same idea with the parking garage. Yes.
Okay.
So Lance, I hadn't really thought of that.
Yeah, that was my only concern.
I mean, but
is what they-
I'm still wondering, it's still money. I mean, it's not like, it's true that it's an inconvenience for people to have coins, but it's also an inconvenience for them to come somewhere and buy the smart card. I mean, so they could, in the interim, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'm really worried about just having a complicated problem if we promise a transfer.
Well,
because-
maybe we can launch a campaign like on November, November 1st. We will no longer accept smart cards,
Yeah, that's what I
and-
think we should do.
and do something like that. Just and give people enough notice.
That's exactly what I think we should do. Agree.
Well, I think this calendar seems reasonable. And it sounds like we can always extend the use of it in the garage if we're getting issues at that point with people feeling like they have a lot of money on the cards that they still want to be able to get value from, right? It's sort of like, it's a little bit of an arbitrary date, that one is. The meters is fixed.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I mean, it seems like sooner rather than later, we should get out the notice, even very soon, on the smart card machines, that this program is being phased out for all meters on November 1st. Please use up your balance. You'll be able to use it in the garage up till January 1st. But then you're going to have to bear the cost. You're not going to get a refund. I mean, just say those things in a better way than I just said it.
Yeah, we can update a slide similar to this or put it in text, and we'll get it out this week, and we'll also make sure to translate into Spanish as well.
Right. I feel a little bad because I've been giving out incorrect information, because I think at one point we had discussed that people would be able to transfer their cards onto their app. So I want to be very upfront that if that's a decision that we're not going to do that we are upfront with that ahead of time. So maybe it merits a letter to the editor. I think August is probably not a good time to do it, but maybe in September, I think in addition to all the other campaigns on the machines, that I think we just can't say it enough, because I don't want anybody getting surprised.
And we haven't completely made that decision. We're still gathering information from Passport, meeting with Sandy Webb, the CFO, to understand how the systems work and to make sure that we're fully aware, so that when we do bring that information, we can explain all the pros and cons and the impacts for it.
Right, okay.
There's no
Well,
reason we
I-
can't bring this back September, because we are going to have some discussions in September concerning some policy issues. So maybe that's a good time for us to make the final decision and then begin kind of that formal process.
I feel, though, that we should start advertising what
No, no, I'm
what
not
we
just-
can advertise. I think we need to start advertising like yesterday, almost.
I
We
mean,
agree
I
with that. I'm
don't-
just saying the decision on the end date and whether that will be transferred over. Just
I mean,
that.
based on what there's one fact that I think is incontrovertible, and that's, but correct me if I'm wrong, and that's that we do not have a way of tracking our financial, I mean, how many smart cards are out there and how much money, what kind of balance people are holding.
I don't know if that's completely Correct. That's one thing that we're looking at now in terms of what are the details.
But I've been told that many times.
But I think what you're equating that with it being a financial liability. It may not be, and that's what we're trying to figure out at this point. Whether we contract it or not, or give credits, it's another issue that we want to find out.
But okay, but the information that,
I think we're talking two separate things. is
no,
what
no,
I mean.
no. I also, unless Passport is willing to take on the debt of those cards, then they're not going, then we're going to have to. I don't think there's any way around that. And I'd be really surprised if Passport would be willing to take on that debt.
That's what I
Right?
think. There may be ways of doing. That's why I wanted to talk to them to see how that could work. There may be some ways of that work. So let's get back with the information so we can say for sure. At this point, I don't know the answer.
I would say on the sign, maybe put language that smart cards are being phased out. You won't be able to use them on meters past whatever it is, November.
November, correct.
Right, and I think the signs can be pretty simple. I don't think we need to say anything about the garage at that point. I think the main message is that new meters are coming first week of November. Smart cards will be obsolete. Use it or lose it, yeah, and
That's what I think we
think
should say.
before filling. Maybe there's like a thing that rhymes with that.
But I would also express that if you can, I mean, you can't put a whole book on the meters, but maybe express that the new meters will accept credit cards, debit cards, all these things. So you're giving bad news, we're giving good news at the same time. Like, yay, we're getting meters that we can use. So,
Your meter will be smart, so your card doesn't have to be. All right. Whoever can help us with the advertising on this. Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
next topic, hours of operation. So I've tried to lay out, since we've had so many different looks at hours of operation, tried to provide existing hours of operation in a very concise way, and then what the Nelson Nygaard study had recommended, and now where we're at with Dixon as the proposal. So essentially, the proposal is Monday through Saturday enforcement of meters from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., Sunday from 12 to 6. And so you'll see that it's a later start in the morning. The idea is to let those people that are coming in to grab their coffee or doing those first errands before work to be able to get in and get out without having to pay the meter. But then recognizing that the town stays busy into the evening with all of our restaurants and other food establishments. So this, as Chief Sutter was mentioning, this will play into that discussion of what they look for in replacing the enforcement officers as well.
Should we talk about that right now? And
This is
or do you
one
want
of
to go
the
through?
pieces
I mean,
that,
should we go through? Are you going to go through the whole thing and then we discuss it, or?
it's up to you.
I think we can just eyeball it. I mean, I'm going to anticipate what Mr. Liverman is going to say, which
just
I'm
what I wanna
also
say.
concerned about,
I'm
which
just-
is the Sunday starts
Sundays.
early for somebody who's in church.
Right.
And might not have a smartphone to activate the meter. Although, if you put in an hour at the meter at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, does it hold it and kick in at noon?
I don't think it holds it for that long. If I can recall from what Dixon said, and I can confirm it, I think it only holds it for 2 hours prior to the start of metering. So it would be, if you went with the 12 o'clock, then if they arrive by 10 or at 10 and they prepaid, then it would work.
Well, I remember when I go back all these years up here, but I remember when the discussion on Sunday metering took place, and I remember so many of the promises that were made and we can't hold them to it, but by so many people to get everyone on board in regard to this Sunday metering. I was involved in these conversations, And everyone, I mean, everyone, that's when Jim Floyd and their whole on, everybody was saying, you know, we'll be willing to work with this, I mean, if we can go to 1 o'clock. And the reason why, because most of your area churches, folks are parked there. And you can't stop a service and have someone go move their car. I mean, that wasn't doable. So at that period, everyone agreed. So for me to sit up here and go back on what I was comfortable with at the 1 p.m., I just can't agree with this, unfortunately. I mean, that's really unfair after we've, you know, been down this road. I mean,
You know, I agree with you, Lance. I feel like if we're going to accommodate church, we should accommodate church, so why not make it 1 o'clock?
I agree.
I was going to say, I see four
Thank you.
head agreement nodding. Okay, so Sundays then 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.?
But what I would like to know more about the reasoning, I mean, it seems like downtown in some areas is busy, like from 7 o'clock on, and why should we change that? I mean, I understood what you just said, but if we want to help people get in and out in the morning, why don't we want to help them do that all day? I mean, it's like what's different about that, you know, 7 to 8 period? I feel like we might be losing revenue.
I can answer from what I've heard is that your 7 to, or your 6, really, if we're starting we really start at 6 a.m. on the meters now?
Not throughout town, but on Alexander and the Dinky station, that does start at 6 a.m. Because the
Okay.
first train starts at 4 or 5, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that in reality, if people are catching a train and the meter can only hold the money for 2 hours, then it starts when it starts then anyway. But in any event, I think the idea is that the parking, that very early morning hour parking is mostly residents. So it was a way to give residents a break and encourage residents to come into town and do their drinking of coffee and errands with whoever's open at 8 a.m. I don't know who else is open at 8 a.m., and then,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I don't have a strong feeling about it, except I don't see the logic in it, but, I mean, because it's only the coffee shops that are open, but nobody else feels that way.
Well, I'll just comment. I mean, the logic is demand management, right? If you don't, even if there are people parking there early, if there's plenty of meters available, you know, if we've got 85%, you know, if we've got 15% spaces free, then we shouldn't be necessarily charging. I mean, that would be the rationale.
And I assume this has been studied, because one of the things that stuck with me when Julie was here last time is that it's easier to make changes to be more open and flexible and cheaper than it is to make changes to, if we decide, oh my gosh, we really need to start at 7 a.m. and we've started everything at 9, then that's probably not a good way to go. But it sounds like if both she's recommending it and if Nelson Nygaard recommends it, there's a lot of data that says we can wait.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, it goes back to what David said, is that there's really not that high demand for parking where you need to regulate it, you know, by metering.
I would say, you know, I'm concerned about the other end, you know, the weekend evenings, where I think there is often, in certain parts of town, inadequate parking, you know, near Halo Pub, and to say that the meters stop at 8 p.m. when there is a lot of demand, I think enough demand to manage, I don't see why you wouldn't extend it to a later hour. And I did ask Julie this question twice last month. I felt like I didn't really get a satisfactory answer, except that she felt like she doesn't know whether there's enough demand to justify charging for the parking at that time. I think there is some data gathering that's been done that might indicate under the current system that it would be warranted, but once we publicize the availability of the university parking lots after hours and stuff like that, maybe the demand for street parking would go down. But I would be, I mean, I think the only reason that Julie was recommending finishing the charges at 8 was because she was hearing from the merchants that they didn't want to be charging later in the evening, and I'm not sure that that's what should be driving the decision. It should really be, if we're saying it's about demand management, it should be about the demand.
Well, I think that she was also commenting on enforcement, and she said that all these times have to be based on proper enforcement. And I don't know if enforcement is after 8 p.m.
I would say that we would schedule the shifts as to whatever, to fit whatever mayor and council decided. So if 8 o'clock, we would make the shifts work and staff it accordingly. I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is to wait and see in what direction we go and then staff it accordingly.
I think one of the things we talked about at Public Works is right now enforcement doesn't align with the hours, but that in the new system, enforcement should align.
It seems like maybe this is something we look at where if we go to, what's it called, when you can add the time and there's a longer limit? Because one of the things I worry about on a Saturday night, if you're doing dinner and a movie, that then you're there for longer than 2 hours. Or if you're seeing a movie, oftentimes you're there for longer than 2 hours, and you don't want to be, catching people at the tail end, sort of like church. But
Right, but
it's
the Nelson Nygaard recommendation was to end the time limits after 4 p.m.,
right.
but still charge for the parking.
Right, I think some
Right.
of what you may find is that if you extend the time, and I think we had this discussion, maybe at economic development, I can't recall, but if you extend it so that after 5 o'clock, you can have a 3-hour stay, then you may find you get a lot of those restaurant shift workers coming in, because that somewhat aligns to the start of those evening shifts. And so they just have to pay for 3 hours, but then they can park until 2 a.m., and you're not getting that turnover of those spots.
But if we extended it to 10 p.m., but only allowed 3 hours, that would solve that problem.
I think it makes it complicated. I think that was the issue, was that it was making it too complicated, and to start, you want to start simple. So I don't know, my recommendation might be like you start simple by having it stop at, like, you follow these recommendations, and then if we want to do where you have extended, you can extend your time, then that comes with like that nice thing, and then the not nice thing would be, and you have to pay for another hour, right? You can, I don't know. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm worried about the dinner and movie people too, from the Garden Theater. So and I also don't know how many new people, I mean, if we're talking about revenue only, I could say, yeah, we should extend it, just like I feel like we should in the morning too, because revenue is revenue. But I don't think there are going to be that many new people after 8 looking for a spot. I mean, that's one thing I'm not so sure of. Like, how many people come in after 8
I'm not-
looking for a new spot?
Well, as I said, there are places where that happens, the ice cream shops.
Right.
Right. Some places where you get a drink.
Right.
Well, how about if we hold these thoughts for just a minute, and my next slide is about the zones. So maybe that's what we should look at right now. So basically what we're trying to get to is 3 zones rather than, plethora of zones that we have now. So what you see on the screen right now is what would be considered Zone 1. So this is the 2-hour and the 30-minute parking locations. 30-minute locations are shown in yellow. I apologize that it's very close to the background color, and then you've got the green are the 2-hour meter locations. So it's a condensed area of the central business district that is proposed to have that 2-hour zone. I'm going to bring up the next slide, which will show you Zone 2. This is the area that's proposed to have 3-hour time limits. So you're not that far from those destinations downtown if you do need that 3-hour parking time limit for your dinner and other activities. So I don't know if that changes the complexion of those hours of operation for you, but I'm just putting it out there. And then just so you can see, then this would be the Zone 3, which is basically parking that's allowed within that entire hours of operation. So if you choose to have your hours of operation from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., these areas you can park for that full time in these zones. At the top is Franklin. Yes, Franklin and a little bit of Witherspoon. Right now it's currently, I think, a 10-hour. Yes.
Is Henry also,
Henry's not currently metered. That's been a proposal that we've discussed with
Yeah.
council before because of the
The restaurant,
additional,
yeah.
the restaurant and the other activity, the business activity in that area is to extend meters on Witherspoon and Henry. But the way this current program is putting together is replacing what we have now.
it's, because we talked about doing that sooner rather than later as Avalon Bay fills up, which, by the way, I don't know how, does anybody know what the occupancy is of Avalon Bay yet? Is it full? Nobody
I think
knows?
they're pretty much full. I haven't had a report in a while.
Yeah, and
It
that
seems like
leads
we
into-
should add, we did as a council decide to do that at one point, so it seems like we should do it while we're doing this, doesn't it? Council members?
On Henry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we had a big discussion and we all
Yeah, we-
approved
we-
it and we
yeah, we
decided
talked
on how
about it.
many hours.
Yeah, we did talk about it, but I forgot the hours. Was it 3 hours?
I think at that time we said we were going to do 3 hours, and it was for Witherspoon, Henry, and Franklin that we were going to put meters in.
I'm sorry, what is the time limit on this slide you're showing us now?
This would be for the entire time of operation.
Okay.
I mean, so essentially, it's like 20-hour parking, but you have to only pay for those hours of operation, if that makes sense.
Right,
I
so
mean,
it's free before it kicks in and it's free after.
Correct.
Right, okay.
But it does kind of contradict our earlier decision to because we wanted to discourage Avalon Bay residents from parking on the street, although, of course, the meters will capture revenue, so maybe that doesn't matter as much.
But on Henry, there's a limited time you can park. You can't park all day on Henry.
Correct. Right now,
Yeah,
I
so-
think it's 2-hour
Yeah,
time
2 hour
limit.
parking now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and at the same time, if we were considering any changes on Franklin and Witherspoon and Henry, we need to also consider, that's one of my topics for future discussion, is the Franklin lot of, is that going to be used in a short-term basis for parking that we would monitor and permit through the Passport app? Or are we pulling that off of the table? And I
Have
don't
you had any recent discussions with the school district? Are they still in need of parking there? I think at one point they were concerned I just haven't been tracking exactly how their proposal for the high school and building at the high
Some
school,
things
but now
change.
that's like,
Yeah.
seems like that's going to be phase 2. Who's been following the referendum on the high school part? Anybody?
Well,
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I know at one point they were interested, so I just want to be careful that we make sure that we're talking to them and don't have two groups of people think that they can park there. But it seems, I've had some conversations with Ms. Crummuller about this. I think the two of us maybe are on different sides on this one, so maybe I'll open it up to other people. I would summarize our differences as we have an empty parking lot. We might as well be monetizing it, if only for a short term. And then the counter to that is you don't want to
start something.
start something and then
Yes.
pull the rug out from under people.
And that's the thing that I'm concerned about. If we do start there, and we're talking about the affordable housing plan and whatever else, and then you pull it from under them, I think you'll have a whole group supporting what you had in the past, supporting the parking over the housing. And
I-
that's what I'm thinking, but that's just me.
Well, I think we've been talking about parking as not being the highest, best use of our public spaces, and this is a perfect example. I feel like it could be used, well, for one thing, the downside is exactly what Lance said. It's not just that those people will be upset when they get their parking takeaway, but new demand will have been created wherever those people were parking. Let's say it was in the downtown streets, those spots are going to start being used by someone else, getting used to those spots. And so as soon as all the people that are parking in the Franklin lot get cut loose and have to park elsewhere, it's going to put pressure everywhere else. And I think we're just, by creating new additional parking that wasn't there before, we're creating a new demand. It's just like some parking guru said, parking is like yeast for cars. So I feel really strongly that we shouldn't do it. I also think there might be some fun things like a kids bike training area or a skateboarding place where we're rollerblading for kids, or a dog park, a temporary dog park.
All in favor?
Temporary dog? Are you saying we'd provide a dog park and then yank it away from our dog-owning residents? I don't think that'll make us any more popular. And I think there's also political downside to having this plentiful parking and saying you can't use it because we think they'll get mad at us when we take it away. I mean,
It's not because they'll get mad.
I think that it's going to be perceived that way. And I think it's a political problem either at the beginning when we say you can't use it for parking now, or in 2 years or 3 years when we say you can't use it for parking then. And I think that the solution is to identify the parkers who need it, like downtown employees, and to find another solution for those people in the interim 3 years, wherever it's going to be some satellite location where they can park, and there can be shuttles that can take them into downtown. But I think, this is a problem. That employee parking problem is one that is not going to go away because we don't provide the parking now.
But we're taking a new responsibility by doing that then, that we've never taken that responsibility before, to provide parking for downtown employers.
I think that part of the parking study and part of what we're hearing from Merchants Association and the economic development people is that it's a problem that we do need to solve. And it's a problem we need to solve not just for the downtown employers, but it's a problem we need to solve for the bicyclists, because parking that's being used by those downtown employees now is located in areas which have been identified for bike lanes. I think there are other constituencies that are affected by this than just the downtown employees. but I think it's something, if it's a problem we can solve, I think we're hearing from a number of directions that it's something we should take on.
I think I think that was well put. I think that this was. I don't think anybody was expecting to have this conversation tonight.
No, we
So I would say people should continue to think about it, and I would challenge my colleagues who don't want to put parking there, if they just want that space to lay fallow, or what other use that could be. But I feel like we should bring that back for another discussion. That raises, though, another question I had, because there are some surface lots, and so are those times, like the lots that are behind Nassau Street, are those 3 hours? Are those, what is the time for those?
Those have, I know they have some 30-minute spaces. There's 2 hours. It would be, I think the lots within those zones would have the same time limits as those zones. Yes. So what I put up now is just the overall map showing you the 3 different zones with
Yeah.
the regulations associated.
Currently, some of them are 10-hour meters as well. I'm not sure exactly how many of them, but the area that's, I guess, like behind Starbucks, those are definitely 10-hour meters.
Right, but again, it's looking at, that's the higher demand area.
No, I agree. They shouldn't be 10-hour meters there,
Right.
which is another reason why we're with the new system, we are creating new problems for downtown employees. And to have an immediate solution and then perhaps a long-term solution is sort of a good idea.
Right, but we have shifted some of the Zone 3 spaces. Some of those, I think, were even 2-hour spaces. So now they're becoming all-day spaces. So there is a give and take that's happening among all of the different zones.
And have you counted so that we stay, I mean, it almost looks like we're adding more 2-hour spaces and taking away, I mean, are we, in terms of the number, you know what I'm asking, like, so the number right now of 5-hour spaces, 10-hour spaces, 2-hour spaces, is that staying relatively consistent, or are we changing that?
I will check with the consultant and report back on that
And
question.
I don't know if we have the magic combination now anyway, so maybe we do need to be shifting it.
Well, I also, I feel like the Franklin lot, it does need to be discussed and, affirmatively discussed, and it really just kind of evolved without conscious discussion on our part. And that's one reason and I feel strongly that we should not do it. But the same goes for downtown employee parking. Maybe everyone just assumes that's something that the town should be doing, but I feel like we never have decided as a group that we feel responsible for downtown employees. I have sympathy for employees who don't have parking, but I also know that there are many employers who provide parking for their employees downtown, and I'm wondering, I just think the whole issue isn't as cut and dry. Oh, the town should help provide low-cost parking for employees. To me, that's not a slam dunk decision. It's taxpayers. When we say we're talking about taxpayers providing parking for business owners. That's how I look at it. Other people might say, I don't know what the other view is, but to me it's pretty cut and dry that the town providing low-cost parking is benefiting the employers. So I don't know if now is the time to have that discussion, or if we should, if
No,
everyone...
I feel like people need to think about the Franklin lot, and I think we need to come back, and I think we need to probably have more people here when we discuss it.
Well, that's why I do think we should have that
Right.
discussion.
I'd also like to, I think, got kind of lost in the wash that what Liz's point about the school construction, which I don't know whether PHS is in the second question or the first question, but you're talking about a lot of construction across the street, and I know that when the library was redoing its second floor, that the subcontractors were told to park in the Franklin lot. I don't know how many of them actually did. We would see them in the garage all the time, but you know, you're talking about the potential for major construction projects to be going on simultaneously in a 10-block, 5-block area. You know, we're going to need to, and I guess you could look at that as employee parking as well. So maybe that factors into that discussion, but anyway, I'm not adding clarity, I'm confusing the matter
Well,
more. Do we go back to deciding what the meter hours are going to be,
Yes.
Deanna?
So
You
at
want to
the-
go back a couple slides?
Actually-
At the next council meeting, what I can do as part of that update is bring back the question about Franklin Lot and employee parking, and get you more of the details of what's existing and what the different demands are. So yeah, we're back to that question of hours of operation.
Actually, could I ask one more question about that map? Because I just happened to notice that Wiggins Hamilton doesn't show any parking. And I'm wondering if that's a hopeful message for the bicycling community, or is it just an omission?
It's currently not metered and it won't be metered.
Ah.
That's all. But we will have the corridor study, professional service agreement at the next meeting, so that'll be a next step for the Beta Bike Lane. So back to the question on hours of operation.
So the question that I have is, what is the demand between 8 and 9? And it seems that people are already, they're either seated at a restaurant, in a movie, or at McCarter, I'm assuming. Or in the library at a free program.
In the evening, you're saying,
Yeah.
between 8 and 9?
Yeah, I'm talking about, do we do 9 to 9 or 9 to 8 as is recommended? I'm all for the 9 a.m. start. I think it will actually make things easier from, I suspect, not based, I don't have any expertise, I suspect it'll help with circulation in the downtown. It will cut down on time, and it'll be a sort of grab-and-go situation.
Right, and I think it's also partially from Dixon assisting with the loading and unloading activities, that there's that block of time that really any spot could be used as a loading zone.
So
I'm fine with a 9 too.
with the 9
9
p.m.?
The
Oh,
9 a.m. start.
Okay.
I'm still,
What about 9 p.m. for the,
Well, I listed some of the uses that I think are more transient in that time frame. I listed some of the uses I think are more transient in that 8 to 9 hour. So if the question you're asking, I think you were asking, is do we need turnover at that time? I think the answer is yes, in certain parts of town. I mean, Palmer Square and Hallfish, you know, there's Bent Spoon and the Halo Pub, which have lines out the door, you know, certainly during the summer. And those go till 11 p.m., I think. I mean, not that I'm suggesting we go all the way till then, but I think that having some turnover in that time frame is a good idea.
It does seem, though, that the days make more sense to have Monday through Thursday. If we decide to extend later, to me, it makes more sense to have Monday through Thursday treated one way, and then Friday and Saturday have the extended hours.
Yeah. Which is what Nelson Nygaard had
Right.
recommended, and that's sort of what I'm advocating for.
I think that Dixon said, that came up in one of our discussions, and they said that just confuses the parking person. I mean, I agree with you, but I'm saying that that's why because I think either I mentioned it, someone else mentioned it, and Dixon was saying, the more you do this, the more you're going to confuse your parking person, the person that's parking, because they're going to think one thing and not. I mean, I agree, that makes sense to me, but.
Well,
where signage will be important.
Yeah, clear
It-
signage.
Correct, right.
I mean, the hours
Signage
of
and
operation
marketing
always on the
campaign.
meters, and,
Yeah.
you know, we changed at some point from ending paid parking at we extended it from 7 till 8, you know, and people were confused for a little bit, and then they figured it out. I mean,
Maybe we can give out warnings instead of tickets for that last hour for a little bit,
For-
with
Grace-
compliments of the mayor,
Have a
yeah.
grace hour for
Yeah.
the first month.
So
No-
are-
Okay, well, so I just wanted to get, let's get like more of a sense here, because I don't know if there's complete consensus. This is what I hear so far as consensus. Everybody's fine with starting 9 a.m. Monday through Saturday and 1 p.m. on Sunday.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so that was step one. Everyone is okay with ending at 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday.
Correct. I
Yes.
am.
Thanks, Lance. Are people okay with ending 6 p.m. on Sunday?
yeah,
Well, why don't we start, to
I'm
make
fine.
it simple, why don't we end at 8 PM on Sunday?
Are people okay with ending on 8 p.m. on Sunday?
I'm okay with that.
I'm fine.
sure.
Okay. All right. So then we just have with the end time for Friday and Saturday. So why don't we just take a vote? So just curious, straw poll, like who wants it to end Friday, Saturday at 8 p.m.? And who wants it to end at 9 p.m.
Or later.
or later? 9 p.m. All right. And what?
Abstain?
Okay. Lance is on the. Lance wants to keep
I'm
his
on the
friend.
fence, I'm on-
All right. And then what? Later, you mean 10?
Should
And
we
who
call
wants it to
Heather?
end? Who
Should
wants it to end at 10?
9.
Okay, 9. All right. So it sounds like you have a slim
slim margin for
slim
9
margin.
PM,
I'm
okay.
9.
for 9.
Okay.
That's just for Friday and
and
Saturday.
Correct. Okay. And I'll make sure to memorialize this so that at our next meeting, we can say, okay, on the 13th, these were the decisions made. Okay. So now we've got the zones, and other than the question of the extension on Henry and what's happening with Franklin,
And the surface lots.
correct, surface lots and just verifying what the count.
Well, I think I'm
I'm
more
sorry.
concerned about, if the surface lots are, if there are a lot of 10-hour spaces in there, just making sure that we have other spots for those that are.
I share that concern,
Okay.
especially since I used those for long hours at some point.
That when Jenny was a downtown employee, she saw the need.
Well, I think the provision of alternatives is in the parking garage. I mean, right, that's all day parking, and
Yes, and the future potential with the shared parking opportunities as well could add some flexibility into the system. Okay, and so just to show you, because previously I show you the yellow spots where all of the 30-minute meters are, we have a table that shows you exactly what's happening with those 30-minute meters. There has been shifting and additions of meters, like we have new meters proposed on Chambers, on Palmer Square West, some in the southern block of Witherspoon, south of Wholefish. Currently, they're only north of Wholefish, so the idea is to bring a couple into that southern area. A majority of these are going to be kept as is. One of the questions that has come up with the Wawa lot is, do we want to meter those 15-minute spaces? Do we want to make any changes? So I just want to put that out there that we're still looking at that piece. So at our next meetings, I'll bring updates and new information on that piece.
Can I just add that, a little bit to that, that it turns out that that we don't enforce, I don't want to say that too loud,
Well, it's
There's no
university
enfor-
enforcement,
And-
and so.
so that we don't get much revenue and people don't use it, and so we were saying, I mean, I thought that if we didn't have any meters, people might park there long-term, or try to park there long-term, And so why not just keep
So
keep the
certainty.
Right.
just keep the meters even if we're not really enforcing them, and not get the new expensive meters. Just have like dummy meters to keep people kind of like those surveillance cameras.
But I have been actually before the meeting. I spoke with our enforcement officer and talking about, well, do we want to consider taking over the enforcement of those meters from the university? What are the advantages and disadvantages of that? And if we do buy the new equipment, it does allow that information then to be shown on their tablets so they can readily see when there are violations if they need to come down. So there's pros and cons, and that's where I want to keep the dialogue with other staff and the university before we come back on that one.
I would also, we're talking about the Wawa meters, right?
Yes.
I mean, I also think there's a large number of Wawa parking spaces. I don't know if they're all 15-minute spaces or they're just a few that are metered spaces, but I was parking there for the Dinky recently, and I think there's probably way more parking spaces for the Wawa than are needed based on the fact that probably most of the clientele is university students who are walking there. So what I'm suggesting is maybe we keep 4 or 6 15-minute or maybe they're even 30-minute meters for Wawa, and turn more of those meters in that area over to being meters for Dinky Parkers, for
We could
for
make them
longer.
really expensive. Like, these are the really nice
Well,
those meters.
I mean, as a shorty person that goes and buy shorties and burrito bowls at Wawa's, it's a 6-inch, I think. Yeah, with the, so that's my whole menu here. But anyway, I have gone there where there haven't been a space, especially during lunchtime.
Okay.
So I will say I have not had a space at the Wawa section.
Yes,
But-
I've seen it quite busy where they're using the drop-off area for their run in and out. So, but we will continue to look at that. We'll look at the usage of the Wawa spaces with the university as well. So this is just a map, and again, I'm sorry that the yellow is not showing up, especially on the projection, but I will get everybody a copy of the presentation. So this shows exactly where all of the 30-minute meters will be. So then back to, I think we've made this decision, but I wanted just to bring back this slide from the consultant that we saw back in July. And I mean, essentially we are going with the zones with time limits. I mean, that sounds what the discussion, where we're at with our 3 zones, with the 2-hour, the 3-hour, and then the essentially hours of operation. So just to, instead of my question at the bottom of future decision, it sounds like we're there. We're using the zones with time limits. And we'll look in the future at with the escalating pay to stay or the time of day. So again, we've touched on some of these topics, but these are additional topics over the rest of August, September, and October. We'll be bringing back to you for discussions. I'll be back at the next meeting in August, and then in September we'll have Dixon with us for both of those meetings. And those meetings in September are really going to be heavy on the rates and the financial modeling, as well as the code changes that need to take place before we implement the new system. So, yes.
Ms. Miller?
Well, especially Tim, did you watch carefully the meeting? I mean, didn't we already discuss the meter zoning? I mean, the loading zones?
Yeah, I thought the loading zone was remaining as is, correct? Was
I think we had that discussion and everyone decided that we didn't want meters in the loading zones, just so we can avoid one more discussion.
That's great. I mean, if you can give me that consensus tonight, I'll take it off the list of items.
I think that's right. I think the other thing
I
we said
think
for the signage was that it could be loading zone up until 5 p.m. and then we can mark it as like an Uber, Lyft, or ride sharing
Yes.
drop-off pickup spot. in the evening when it's not going to be conflicting with the loading.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Good. I'll take that off the list. Thank you for all of the time tonight on this discussion.
Thank,
Oh my-
no,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
so, there's
Yeah,
so
thank
many
you.
details, and every decision seems to impact the next one. So, and your slides were beautiful.
Beautiful slides.
Also,
I love talking about parking.
All right, thank you very much.
thank you. Okay. Were you being facetious, Mr. Liverman?
No, I'm
Okay. We've come to our ordinance public hearings. The first one is 2018-15 bond ordinance providing for the reconstruction of Cherry Valley Road in and by Princeton in the county of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $1,001,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $98,446 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the cost thereof. Is there a...
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this ordinance at this time? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes. Next, we come to 2018-16 ordinance regulating speed limits on Mercer Street and Mercer Road and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968 to provide a speed limit reduction from 48 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour between the Lovers Lane, Olden Lane intersection and the southern end of Mercer County Bridge number 330.3. And I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And
So moved.
open to Council.
Second.
Oh,
Moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next, we come to ordinance introductions, 2018-17, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton establishing fees and procedures for performing marriage and civil union ceremonies and amending Chapter 2 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Does this not need to get changed on the township side, too? We normally have both, don't we?
No, sometimes I've seen where they just are taking out of the one,
It might be because we already consolidated the
township.
administration or something.
Okay.
And since it wasn't,
is fees.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Just by way of background, Jenny and I perform marriages, and it seems more frequently we're performing marriages for people who don't live in Princeton.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity to charge a fee and use that money to help fund the emergency fund that Human Services
Oh, yeah.
operates.
Should this be the fee for everyone or just out of town?
It's a fee, it's $200 if the couple, if both people getting married are from out of town.
Okay.
If there's only one Princeton person, it's $50. Or if there's two Princeton people, it's $50.
Okay. That's fine.
All right. Is there any discussion on this?
I do.
I can tell you that I think there might be some amusing headlines with puns coming up in Friday's newspaper articles. All right, then is there a motion to introduce?
so moved.
Moved by Ms. Crum-Miller,
Second.
and who was that? Is that Mr.
David.
Cohen? Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on August 27th, 2018. Next is 2018-18, an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the Municipality of Princeton. Mark, do you want to say anything about this?
This is the ordinance we do on an annual basis. It provides for the 1.5% salary COLA adjustment for the non-contractual employees.
Are there any questions or comments from council on this, or is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been introduced by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Krumiller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And so the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on August 27th, 2018. Next, we come to resolutions, starting with 18270, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to EMY Solutions, LLC, for the project known as North Harrison Street Maintenance Garage Various Repairs in the amount of $545,000. Mr. Huff is here if anybody has any questions for Mr. Huff. Otherwise, is there a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Moved by Ms. Krumiller,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18271, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Hyundai Construction Equipment Americas Incorporated via the Sourcewell contract for a Hyundai 35D9F forklift in the amount of $48,020.32. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Quinn, seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18272, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to National Auto Fleet Group via the Sourcewell contract for a 2019 Chevrolet Silverado, a 2019 Ford Super Duty, a 2019 Chevrolet, and two 2019 GMC Sierras in the total amount of $258,063.76. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18273, and I recommend we take resolutions 18273 and 18274 together, which are both for the purchase of additional vehicles. Is there a motion to move those two resolutions?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Ms. Fraga, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolutions passed unanimously. Next is 18276, resolution authorizing a contract extension with Julie Dixon, Dixon Resources Unlimited, in an amount not to exceed $75,000 for an additional 6-month contract term for continued consulting services in connection with the parking management plan. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Krumiller. Comments or discussion? Yep, Mr. Cohen? Oh,
I didn't hear Jenny second it. I seconded.
oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, but did she?
No, I was asking if there's anybody had a question, or, I think there was a second. All right,
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And finally is 18277, resolution amending Resolution 18132, which authorizes the use of New Jersey State Contract A42261, T number T-0849, to purchase equipment for a new municipal fueling station for an amended total amount of $155,000, which is an increase of $13,042.42. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman
Second.
and seconded by Ms. Krumiller. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes unanimously. And next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like removed? Seeing no one, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krumiller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
That's
All
everybody.
in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.